It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend getaway. Ava and Mia had just finished their exhausting finals, and the promise of a secluded, luxurious resort by the coast was the perfect way to unwind. They were thrilled when they discovered Midnight Bay Resort, a private place surrounded by towering cliffs and dense, whispering forests. But beyond the picturesque beauty of the location, there was something unsettling in the air, a heaviness that both girls felt but brushed off as the thrill of being somewhere new. The resort staff seemed a bit too eager to make them feel at home, constantly warning them about where to go and what to avoid, especially after dark. Stay away from the pool area at night, the elderly receptionist warned them with a tone that sent a shiver down their spines. People say it's haunted. Before we continue, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel and turn the notification sign on for more horror stories in future. Let's get back to the story. Ava and Mia exchanged glances, sharing a half laugh at the melodrama, and thanked her, rolling their eyes as they walked away. Yet, as dusk approached, the thought lingered. Was it really just a tale to keep the guests from nighttime wandering? Late into the evening, after a few glasses of wine and laughter-filled conversations, the girls began to feel the allure of the unknown. They'd had their fill of the resort's evening entertainment, and the mystique surrounding the pool tugged at their curiosity. Both girls shared a love for urban legends, and what better way to celebrate their trip than with a little adventure? The moon hung low and full, casting an eerie glow across the courtyard as they approached the pool. The area was deserted, with a faint mist hanging over the water's surface. The pool itself was massive, Olympic-sized, with darkened corners and shadows that danced with every flicker of the garden lights. The blue tiles, worn and cracked in places, seemed almost black under the faint light. They laughed nervously, with Mia insisting, "There's nothing here. It's just an empty pool." See, but Ava was already beginning to regret the idea. She had this feeling, a prickling along the back of her neck, as though they weren't alone. Suddenly, a ripple appeared at the far end of the pool, breaking the stillness of the water. Ava and Mia froze, staring as a shape slowly began to surface. It wasn't a vague figure or shadow, they could clearly make out its sharp, skeletal form. It was humanoid, but entirely wrong. Its skin, slick and translucent, glistened under the moonlight, while its elongated fingers ended in razor-sharp claws that scratched against the pool's edge, leaving deep, jagged marks. Its eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to absorb light, and as it moved closer to the girls, the stench of decay filled the air. This creature was no trick of the light or misinterpretation. It was real, and it was crawling out of the water. The girls wanted to scream, but terror had a grip on their throats. The creature let out a sound, a guttural growl that echoed off the walls and reverberated in their bones. Then, with a sickening pop, its head twisted to the side, locking its hollow gaze on them. Ava grabbed Mia's hand, pulling her backward, whispering desperately, "We need to run now." But the creature had already anticipated their move. In one swift motion, it lunged, its bony arms stretching far beyond any human reach, its fingers grasping at the edge of the pool as it tried to pull itself fully onto the deck. They could see its exposed rib cage, its heart beating visibly under the thin, rotten skin, and yet it was alive, undeniably alive. The girls bolted toward the pool gate, their footsteps pounding against the tile as the creature dragged itself closer, its claws scraping the ground. The noise was a grating metal-on-stone sound that echoed in the otherwise silent courtyard. Panic surged through them as they realized the gate they'd come through was now locked. How was that possible? Mia's hands shook as she tugged at the metal latch, but it wouldn't budge. Ava, what do we do? She cried, looking over her shoulder. The creature had closed half the distance, its grotesque form slithering in their direction, its black eyes locked onto them with an insatiable hunger. Desperate, Ava looked around and spotted the lifeguard tower on the opposite side of the pool. We have to climb, she said, pointing. It was their only chance. The two girls sprinted, their hearts pounding wildly. As they reached the base of the tower, Mia scrambled up the ladder first, her hands slipping with sweat and fear. Ava was right behind her, but just as she reached the top, she felt a cold, slimy hand wrap around her ankle. She let out a piercing scream, kicking frantically, until the grip loosened. From above, Mia reached down, grabbing Ava's wrists and pulling her up. They both collapsed at the top, gasping for breath, as they watched the creature circle the bottom of the tower, staring up at them with a twisted smile, its sharp teeth glinting. As they clung to the narrow platform, Mia's mind raced, trying to recall anything she'd heard from the locals earlier in the day. She remembered a rumor about a man who drowned years ago. His body never recovered. The pool had been closed for months after his death, but people claimed to have seen him in the water, emerging on moonlit nights, twisted by the sea's curse into a ghastly form, his spirit forever tied to the pool. He's the drowned man, Mia whispered, her voice trembling. They say he waits for someone to pull under, to replace him. Ava's face paled as she processed Mia's words. But even as the reality of their situation sank in, they knew they couldn't stay perched on the tower forever. The creature's patience was terrifying as it continued to watch them, almost calculating. Minutes dragged by, each one filled with a dread that gnawed at them. Suddenly, the creature moved to the edge of the pool and sank back into the water, its figure disappearing beneath the surface. The pool returned to its unnatural stillness, and Ava looked at Mia, her voice shaky. Maybe it's gone, she said, the faintest glimmer of hope in her voice. But Mia shook her head. It's waiting, she whispered, unable to tear her eyes away from the water. They debated their options. If they stayed, the creature might simply wait for them to weaken or try to escape again. With no other choice, they made a pact to swim across the pool as fast as they could, back to the side closest to the resort lobby. Taking a deep breath, the two girls descended the tower and approached the pool's edge, steeling themselves. They counted to 3 and dove in, the icy water instantly numbing their limbs. Every second felt like an eternity, their strokes frantic as they tried to reach the other side. But halfway across, they felt a current, a powerful pull as the water around them grew darker, colder. The creature was upon them, its claws grazing their legs as it swam with inhuman speed. It let out an ear-splitting shriek that filled their ears, the sound vibrating through the water, and Ava felt a sharp pain as the creature's claw scraped her calf. They kicked harder, adrenaline fueling them, and just as they reached the edge, they pulled themselves out, collapsing onto the tiles. Behind them, the creature surfaced again, glaring with rage. But as the first rays of dawn broke over the courtyard, its foam began to fade, its angry shrieks echoing in the morning air, until, with one final hiss, it dissolved into the pool. Ava and Mia reported the incident to the resort staff, but they were met with a knowing glance and a somber nod. The pool was shut down indefinitely, with signs warning others to stay away after dark. To this day, some say that on moonlit nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear the scratching sounds of claws against tiles and the faint echo of a guttural growl, waiting for the next swimmer who dares to enter Midnight Bay's haunted waters. I never expected a weekend trip to our neighborhood pool to turn into one of the most unsettling nights of my life. It happened a few summers ago, but even now, just thinking about it gives me chills. My wife, Sarah, and I had decided to spend a quiet Friday evening at our local community pool. It was a small place tucked away in the back of a suburban neighborhood, and during the evening hours, it was often empty, quiet, and peaceful. That night, we were hoping to enjoy a few hours of relaxation and stargazing from the pool's edge. The pool was nearly empty when we arrived. Just a few families wrapping up, towels draped over their shoulders as they headed out to the parking lot. By the time we changed and made our way to the water, we were alone. The place had an eerie stillness that I'd never noticed before. The light was fading as we slipped into the pool, and with the main overhead lights dimmed, only the underwater lights illuminated the surface, casting a faint glow across the water. We were floating peacefully, barely speaking, lost in the quiet, but that calm didn't last. About 20 minutes in, I noticed something strange. As I swam to the deeper end, I felt an intense, chilling draft, like a blast of cold water that came out of nowhere. It made no sense, there was no breeze, and the water was warm. I tried to shake it off as just a patch of cold, but Sarah looked over at me and shivered. "Did you feel that?" she asked. "Yeah," I replied, frowning. "But it's probably nothing." But then it happened again, this time stronger and somehow more intense. It was as if an icy grip had taken hold of my legs, pulling me downward. I shrugged it off and swam towards Sarah, who was now looking around uneasily. I could see in her eyes that she was feeling something strange too. "It's probably just the filter turning on," I joked, trying to lighten the mood. But deep down, I felt uneasy. Sarah wasn't convinced, and neither was I. As we stayed in the deep end, things began to feel even stranger. Every so often, I'd see something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow moving beneath the surface. It wasn't a reflection or the underwater light flickering, it looked like something large was swimming just below us. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the shadows kept appearing, slipping out of sight as soon as I tried to focus. The weirdest part was how silent the pool was. Even though we were in the water, there was no echo of our movements, no splashes. It was as though the pool itself was absorbing sound. Sarah suddenly grabbed my arm, her face pale. "I saw something," she whispered. "Stop messing with me," I said, my voice wavering more than I wanted. She shook her head, her eyes wide and serious. "No, I swear. I saw something right there," she said, pointing to a spot a few feet away, where the water was still rippling slightly. I laughed nervously, brushing it off as some floating leaves, or maybe a trick of the light. But as I stared at the spot, I saw it too. Just for a second, but it was there, something dark, passing below the water. It wasn't a trick of the light or a piece of debris. It was like a shadow, but not cast by anything above. It seemed to be moving in slow circles, barely visible in the dim glow. My heart raced as I scanned the surface, hoping for a logical explanation, but there was nothing. A moment later, I felt it again, that cold grip on my ankle. This time it was stronger, more insistent, and I felt a sudden, irrational urge to get out of the pool. My mind was racing, my instinct screaming that something was wrong. I looked over at Sarah, and she had already started moving toward the edge, her face tense. We both scrambled out of the water, breathless, as if we'd been racing for our lives. My pulse was pounding in my ears, and I could see that Sarah was shaking. We stared at the pool in silence, catching our breath. The water was perfectly still, with only the faint ripples from where we'd just been. The shadows were gone, and the air felt warm again. The whole thing left me with an overwhelming feeling of dread. We dried off quickly and left, hardly saying a word to each other. We drove home in silence, both of us trying to make sense of what we'd experienced. That night, neither of us could sleep. I kept seeing that shadow, remembering the way the water had felt colder than it should. And Sarah, she admitted to me later that she'd felt something more. As we were swimming, she said, she felt like there were hands just beneath the water's surface, reaching up toward her. I'd seen her shivering in the pool, but I never thought it was more than the chill of the night. Hearing her tell me that shook me to my core. We never went back to that pool. I still wonder if it was just our imagination, our minds playing tricks in the dim light and the quiet of the night. But every time I think about it, that creeping sense of fear returns. Maybe there was nothing there. Maybe it was just a shadow cast by our own fears. But then again, maybe we weren't alone in that water.